There are moments in life, quiet moments, when the world tilts slightly on its axis, when something ordinary becomes extraordinary, when a stranger becomes the answer to a prayer you didn't know you were praying. This is a story about one of those moments. James Sullivan had been playing the violin for 38 years. He was 45 now, with dark hair that was just beginning to silver at the temples. His beard was neatly trimmed, streaked with gray that he'd earned through years of late-night practice sessions and early morning rehearsals. He wasn't famous. He'd never played Carnegie Hall, but his hands knew the violin like they knew his own heartbeat, intimately, completely. On this particular Tuesday in late September, James found himself in an old warehouse on the east side of town. The building had been abandoned for years, a relic of the city's industrial past. But 5 years ago, the city had transformed it into a community arts center. They'd kept the bones of the place. The concrete pillars, the high ceilings, the enormous windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. Afternoon light poured through those windows now, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. James came here every Tuesday afternoon. He taught music therapy in the evening, working with veterans and trauma survivors, helping them find words through melodies when speaking became too hard. But he always arrived 2 hours early, just to practice, just to fill the empty space with sound. Today, he wore a simple navy blue shirt and dark pants. Nothing fancy. He'd learned long ago that music didn't care what you wore. Music only cared that you showed up, that you opened your heart, that you let it speak through you. He knelt on the worn wooden floor, his violin case open beside him. The instrument itself was over 100 years old, passed down from his grandfather. The wood had darkened with age, rich and warm like honey. James lifted it carefully, reverently, and tucked it beneath his chin. He closed his eyes, drew the bow across the strings, and began to play. The melody was something he'd been working on for months. Not a famous piece, not Mozart or Bach, just something he'd heard in his dreams. A tune that felt like early morning, like mist rising off a lake, like hope struggling to be born. The notes floated through the warehouse, filling every corner, every shadow. James played with his eyes closed, lost in the music, unaware that he was no longer alone. When he finally paused, lowering his bow, he heard it. The softest sound, like a bird settling its wings. He opened his eyes. 20 feet away, sitting cross-legged on the dusty floor, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Long brown hair fell past her shoulders, catching the afternoon light like strands of caramel. She wore denim overalls over a white t-shirt, and in her small lap, cradled against her chest, she held a stuffed rabbit. The bunny was gray, or had been once. Now it was faded to a softer shade, worn smooth from what must have been years of being held, being needed. But it was the child's face that stopped James's breath. She was looking up at him with an expression of such pure wonder, such desperate hope, that he felt something shift in his chest. Her eyes were wide, her lips were slightly parted, and there was something in her face, a kind of sadness, a weight that seemed far too heavy for someone so young to carry. James lowered his violin slowly. "Hello there," he said gently, his voice soft in the echoing space. "I didn't know anyone else was here." The little girl didn't move. She just kept looking at him, as if she were afraid that speaking might break whatever spell the music had woven. Would you like me to keep playing?" James asked, before the child could answer. Movement caught his eye. Behind one of the concrete pillars, partially hidden in shadow, stood a woman. She stepped forward slowly, almost reluctantly, into the light. She was in her mid-30s, James guessed. Dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore professional clothes, a crisp white blouse and a black pencil skirt, as if she'd just come from an office. But her makeup was smudged slightly beneath her eyes. Her hands were clasped tightly together in front of her chest, and even from this distance, James could see that she'd been crying. "I'm so sorry," the woman said quickly, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "We didn't mean to intrude. We're waiting for a meeting that starts at 4. Lily heard you playing and—" She paused, swallowing hard. She wanted to listen. I should have asked permission. We'll go, please, James said, standing slowly, setting his violin carefully in its case. Please don't go. I'm James Sullivan. I teach music therapy here on Tuesday evenings. You're not intruding at all. The woman managed a small smile. It didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm Patricia Chen, she said. And this is my daughter, Lily. We're here for a grief counseling group. For families who've lost, her voice cracked slightly. For families dealing with loss. James felt his heart constrict. He understood immediately. The past tense hanging in the air. The stuffed rabbit clutched like a lifeline. The way Patricia watched her daughter, with a mixture of fierce love and desperate worry. I'm very sorry, James said simply, because sometimes that's all you can say. Sometimes there are no other words. Patricia nodded, pressing her lips together, fighting for composure. James looked down at Lily. The little girl was still sitting cross-legged, still holding her rabbit, still watching him with those impossibly sad eyes. Lily, James said gently, kneeling down so he was closer to her level. Would you like me to play something? Something just for you? Lily's eyes widened. She nodded slowly, her long hair falling forward over her shoulders. What's your bunny's name? James asked. The little girl looked down at the stuffed animal, then back up at James. Mr. Whiskers, she whispered. He was a present from my daddy. Patricia made a small sound, somewhere between a sob and a gasp. She pressed her hand over her mouth. James felt the weight of those words, was, past tense. He knew that weight. He'd carried it himself once. A long time ago. Mr. Whiskers looks like a very good listener, James said softly. I think he'll enjoy this music. He picked up his violin again, settled it beneath his chin, and thought carefully about what to play. Not something sad, but not something artificially cheerful either. Children could sense dishonesty, especially children who'd learned too early that the world wasn't always safe, wasn't always fair. He needed something honest, something that acknowledged pain but also whispered of possibility, of healing. James thought of his own childhood, of his mother, standing in the backyard on summer evenings, hanging laundry on the clothesline, humming a tune she'd learned from her own mother. He'd been 7 years old, maybe 8, young enough that the world still felt mostly good. He remembered the smell of sun-dried sheets, the way the light turned golden at sunset, the feeling of being completely, perfectly safe. He'd arranged that melody for violin years ago, adding harmonies, weaving in counter melodies that felt like birds singing, like wind through leaves, like his mother's voice still reaching across all the years to comfort him. James closed his eyes and began to play. The melody started softly, tentatively, like dawn breaking. Then it grew, swelling with warmth, with light. The notes danced and intertwined, sometimes joyful, sometimes wistful, always honest. He played with his eyes closed, but he could sense Lily listening, could feel her small presence absorbing every note. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw that Lily had closed hers. Her head was tilted slightly back, her body swayed gently from side to side, and her face, her sad little face, had softened. The tight lines around her mouth had relaxed. Her shoulders had dropped. For just this moment, the weight seemed to have lifted behind her. Patricia stood with both hands pressed over her heart. Tears streamed down her face unchecked, but she was smiling through them. A broken, grateful smile James played until the melody found its natural ending, until the last note faded away like smoke. Like a prayer released into the sky for a long moment, no one spoke. The warehouse was silent, except for the distant sound of traffic outside, the settling of old wood, the breath of 3 people connected by something invisible but undeniable. Lily opened her eyes slowly. She looked at James, and then she smiled. It was a small smile, fragile as spun glass, but real. That was beautiful, she whispered. It sounded like sunshine. James felt his throat tighten. Thank you, he said. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Patricia walked forward slowly, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. She knelt beside her daughter, putting her arm around Lily's small shoulders. My husband, Lily's father, Michael, Patricia's voice shook. He passed away 4 months ago. A massive heart attack. He was 39 years old, healthy, active, and then one morning he was just gone. James set his violin down carefully. "I'm so sorry," he said again. And then, because he knew that sometimes grief needs more than sympathy. "That must be impossibly hard for both of you," Patricia laughed. But it came out more like a sob. "Impossible," she repeated. "Yes, that's exactly the word. Some days I don't know how we're still standing. I go to work, I smile. I make lunches and check homework and pay bills. But inside," she pressed her fist against her chest. "Inside, I'm screaming. Inside, I'm falling apart piece by piece." Lily looked up at her mother. Her small face creased with worry. "Mommy," she said softly. Patricia took a shaky breath. "I'm okay, baby," she said. "I'm okay." But James could see that she wasn't. Not really. He could see the exhaustion etched into her face. The way she held herself together through sheer force of will. The way she'd forgotten how to let herself break. Because breaking meant she couldn't hold Lily together. "Lily," James said gently, "your daddy loved music?" The little girl nodded. "He loved all music," she said. "But especially he loved singing. Every night before bed, he would tuck me in and sing me 3 songs. Always 3. And then he would kiss my forehead right here." She touched her forehead with one small finger. "And he would say, 'Sleep tight, little light,' because he said I was his light." Her voice was so matter-of-fact, so young, but her eyes held oceans of grief. "And now," Lily continued, her voice getting smaller, "now nobody sings to me. And I try to remember the songs, but sometimes I forget. And that makes me so sad because if I forget the songs, I might forget him." Her voice broke on the last word. Patricia pulled Lily close, burying her face in her daughter's hair, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. James sat down on the floor fully, crossing his legs, making himself smaller, less imposing. "Lily," he said, "can I tell you something? Something I learned when I was not much older than you?" Lily nodded, still pressed against her mother. "My father died when I was 13, James said, "and I was so scared I would forget him too." His voice, his laugh, the way he used to call me Buddy and ruffle my hair, I was terrified that those memories would slip away. Lily pulled back from Patricia, looking at James with wide eyes. "Did you forget?" she asked. "No," James said. "I didn't forget. Because I learned something important. Memories aren't just in our minds. They're in our hearts. They're in our bodies. Your daddy's songs are inside you. Lily, even if you can't remember all the words, you remember how they made you feel. You remember that he loved you, that he thought you were his light. Those things, those true things, they don't fade. They become part of who you are." Lily considered this, her small brow furrowed. "But I miss him," she whispered. "I miss him so much it hurts." "Right here." She placed her small hand flat against her chest. "That's where love lives," James said. "Right there in your heart. And when we love someone and they're gone, that place hurts because the love has nowhere to go. It's all trapped inside with no way out. Does that make sense?" Lily nodded slowly. "But here's what I've learned," James continued. "Music can let that love out. Music is like opening a window in your heart. When you hear a beautiful song, or when you sing, or even when you just hum to yourself, that love can flow, it can move, and somehow, in ways I don't fully understand, that love reaches the people we miss, even though we can't see them, even though we can't touch them. The love still connects us." Patricia was crying harder now, but quietly, her hand over her mouth. "So when I play my violin," James said, "I'm talking to my father. I'm talking to my grandmother who taught me to love music. I'm talking to everyone I've ever lost. And I truly believe, they can hear me, not with ears, but with something deeper." Lily looked down at Mr. Whiskers. She stroked the bunny's worn fur. "Do you think my daddy can hear music?" she asked. "Where he is now?" James didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. "I think your daddy hears every note, and I think he's still singing to you. Little light. You just have to listen with your heart instead of your ears." Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at James. "Will you play again?" she asked. "Will you play a song so my daddy can hear?" James felt tears prick his own eyes. "I would be honored," he said. He picked up his violin once more. This time he chose a lullaby, something gentle and slow, something that felt like being held, like safety, like a father's love reaching across the impossible distance between earth and heaven. As he played, he watched Lily close her eyes again, watched her rock gently back and forth, watched Patricia wrap both arms around her daughter, both of them swaying to the music, both of them crying, both of them beginning, just barely beginning, to heal. When the song ended, Patricia looked at James. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was hoarse from crying. "You have no idea what this means, what you've given us." But James did know, because in giving them music, in giving them this moment of peace, he'd been given something too, a reminder of why he'd spent his life learning this instrument, why he'd chosen music therapy instead of performance, why he woke up every day and practiced scales and studied melodies. Music was meant to be medicine. It was meant to reach into the broken places and whisper, "You're not alone! You're not forgotten. You're still capable of feeling beauty. Would you—" Patricia hesitated. "Would you be willing to see Lily again? Maybe play for her sometimes? I could pay you. I know your time is valuable, but I think this helps her more than anything else we've tried. More than the counseling. More than the grief groups." James shook his head at the mention of payment. "I'm here every Tuesday," he said. 2 hours before my evening classes start. Lily is welcome to come listen any time. No charge. This isn't work. This is what I'm supposed to be doing." Patricia's face crumpled with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Over the following weeks, it became a ritual, a sacred routine. Every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, Patricia would arrive with Lily. The little girl would walk straight to her spot on the floor. The same spot where she'd first sat that day. She'd settle cross-legged, Mr. Whiskers in her lap, and wait. And James would play. Sometimes he played classical pieces, Vivaldi and Bach and Mozart. Sometimes he played folk songs his grandmother had taught him. Sometimes he played songs Lily requested, melodies she remembered her father loving, and sometimes he just improvised, letting the music flow from some deep place he didn't fully understand, trusting that it would carry whatever message needed to be carried. Patricia would sit with Lily some days. Other days she'd stand by the pillar, the same pillar she'd hidden behind that first afternoon, and she'd cry, quietly, letting herself finally fall apart, knowing that Lily was occupied, that for these 30 minutes, she could stop being strong, she could stop holding everything together. She could just be a woman who'd lost her husband, a woman who was broken and grieving and trying so hard to survive, and slowly, week by week, something shifted. James began to notice small changes in Lily, the way she smiled more readily, the way she sometimes hummed along with the music, the way she started arriving without clutching Mr. Whiskers quite so desperately. He noticed changes in Patricia, too. The dark circles under her eyes began to fade slightly. Her shoulders didn't carry quite the same rigid tension. She started staying afterward sometimes, talking to James about ordinary things. Her job as a financial analyst, the challenge of raising a daughter alone, the small victories and the continuing struggles. "Some days are still impossible," she told him one Tuesday in early December. "But then I remember. Tuesday is coming. This hour with you and your music. It's become our anchor. Our one guaranteed moment of peace every week." "I'm glad," James said, and he meant it, because these Tuesdays had become his anchor too, his reminder that music mattered, that he mattered, that his small contribution to the world, playing violin in an empty warehouse for a grieving child and her mother, was perhaps the most important work he'd ever done. One Tuesday in late December, just before Christmas, Lily arrived without Mr. Whiskers. James noticed immediately. The little girl walked in holding only her mother's hand. No stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. No security object to shield her from the world. "Lily," James said gently as she settled into her spot, "where's Mr. Whiskers today?" Lily looked up at him. She smiled, and this time the smile reached her eyes. "I left him at home," she said. "On my bed. I think She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think he'll be okay without me for an hour. And I think I'll be okay without him. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. But these were different tears. These were tears of joy, of hope, of watching her daughter take a small but monumental step toward healing. James felt his own eyes sting. I think you're right, he said softly. I think you're both going to be just fine. That day he played something different. Something lighter. Something that sounded like spring. Like new beginnings. Like a child learning to laugh again without guilt. And Lily, she didn't just listen. She stood up. And she danced. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't practiced. It was just a 7-year-old girl spinning in circles. Her arms outstretched. Her hair flying. Her face tilted toward the golden light streaming through the warehouse windows. Patricia watched her daughter dance, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. Laughing because Lily looked so beautiful, so alive. Crying because Michael should have been there to see it. Should have been there to spin their daughter around. Should have been there to grow old with them, but he wasn't. And somehow, impossibly, they were learning to live anyway. When James finished playing, Lily ran to him. Without warning, without hesitation, she threw her small arms around his waist and hugged him tight. Thank you, she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. Thank you for letting my daddy hear music again. Thank you for helping my mom smile. Thank you for being our friend. James knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. He put his hands gently on her small shoulders. Lily, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You and your mom have given me just as much as I've given you. You've reminded me why I do this. You've shown me that music still matters, that kindness still matters, that we can survive the impossible if we help each other. Patricia came forward then. She knelt beside her daughter, and she took James's hand in both of hers. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You've been an angel to us, a literal gift when we needed it most. I don't know what we would have done without these Tuesdays. James shook his head. You would have survived, he said, because you're both stronger than you know. I just got to walk alongside you for a little while. I got to share music with you. That's all. But it wasn't all. And they all knew it. It was everything. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from big dramatic moments. It comes from small weekly rituals, from strangers who become friends, from violin music floating through an old warehouse, from a little girl learning that she can put down her stuffed rabbit and dance, from a mother learning that it's okay to fall apart, from a musician learning that his life's work matters more than he ever imagined. As Patricia and Lily prepared to leave that day, Lily turned back one more time. James, she said, I think my daddy would have really liked you. I think he would have said thank you too. James felt something break open in his chest, something that had been closed for a very long time. He'd been teaching music for 20 years. He'd played at weddings and funerals and everything in between. But this moment right here, this was what it had all been for. I think I would have liked your daddy too, James said. And Lily? I think he's very proud of you, of how brave you've been, of how you're learning to keep living, to keep being his little light. Even though it's so hard, Lily nodded. She waved, a small flutter of her hand. And then she and Patricia walked out into the December afternoon. James stood alone in the warehouse. The light was fading now, turning from gold to amber to purple. He looked at his violin, at this instrument that had been his companion for nearly 4 decades, this wooden box that somehow held the power to heal, to connect, to transform pain into beauty. He thought about all the times he doubted himself, wondered if he should have pursued fame instead of service, if he should have played concert halls instead of community centers, if his life was too small, too ordinary, too unimportant. But standing here now, having witnessed a child learn to dance again, having watched a mother remember how to smile, having been the bridge that allowed a little girl to send her love to her father in heaven, James knew. This was exactly where he was supposed to be. This was exactly what he was supposed to do. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. He picked up his violin one more time. The evening class would be arriving soon. Veterans with PTSD, trauma survivors, people carrying wounds that words couldn't reach. But music could reach them. Music always could. James lifted his bow and began to play.